Well, welcome everyone to my speech about towards the measurement of perceived architectural qualities. I'm actually curious, are there some architects, like architects in the audience? That's like, no? Yeah, okay, like architects, then we will have probably kind of a discussion later on about that. I wrote this, is actually a paper coming out of my master thesis I did like 1 year ago, and together with Gabriel Wurzer, I decided to make a paper out of it. And basically, I wanted to start with a quote from Johanni Palasma, a phenomenologist from, I believe it's now Norway, Sweden, Norway, Finland. As architects, we do not primarily design buildings as physical objects, but the images and feelings of the people who live in them. So basically, architecture is not only about form or a floor plan or the functionality. Architecture is a mixture of everything. And for me, I started as I'm a trained architect, but at some point I decided to shift to project development. And as a project developer, I'm working pretty close with architects, but what I'm doing is I'm kind of judging the outcome of what architects produce. So whether it's good or bad. For a project developer, it's usually all about the cost and if the building is functional. But basically, what else is there? You know, the feeling or the perception, like we had before, environmental psychologics. Somebody mentioned this in the session before. And as we all know, that light, sound, smell influences the body or how we perceive something. And this is also for space. For example, a narrow staircase, people will walk quite faster than on a broad staircase. It's more prominent, you walk slower, you kind of enjoy it. This is something that you can actually measure and see. But basically for the fact that architecture is also, let's say, if not by an architect or project developer or somebody related to it, it's like normal people, they kind of judge it or make their mind due to the looks of it. So what's good, what's bad, that's a pretty interesting question. Is this something good or something bad? Does it have quality or not? Is it functional? It's not really the question in that case. It's whether the visual aspect of all of it, is it appealing, and what do you actually think about it? So I'm browsing through some images that I used in my study, I will get to it. And Professor Frank from TU Vienna also made a kind of substantial quote, assumption that taste is subjective. The judgment of taste does not have the means of objectification which are available for the analytical mind. So basically, how do you objectify? Like there's a pretty much gap between what we perceive and to really the basement of, like, to prove it. So what I'm trying to do, or what I try to do, is bridge the gap between the theoretical approach and a scientific validation. So if people say this is good looking, how do you actually prove it's good looking? What is the measurement, or what is the kind of method how to do this? And in order to do so, I'm actually already jumping probably pretty much to the end. Like this is the result which I will come to. But my paper or my thesis is based on a paper from neurobiologists of the Aalto University in Finland. What they basically did is they are showing people, or they let people draw on a human body. It's called bodily maps of emotions. They give them some visual stimuli, like something that makes you sad or makes you happy, or they kind of try to figure that out and let them draw on a neutralized body where it is, for example, where do you feel love? Love in the whole body. The red region means that you feel it everywhere. Or sadness is kind of an upper part. So this is just a result of the paper of them. And what we did, or what I did, is I used this methodology and transferred it to architecture. So the body became the house, and the emotions became some qualities. I call it qualities. Please don't be very critical about the term quality. It is some, how can I say it? I used some words that are not basically directly linked to architecture in order to prove the methodology, like what they did here, prove a methodology and not trying to rate architecture. This is something that could be done, probably, maybe, who knows, but this is not what my intention was. It's all about the methodology, how to get there. So what I did was I conducted the survey. It's intercontinental. It's between Vienna and Shanghai, since I did this masterthesis at the TU Vienna and the Tongji University in Shanghai. And I had two areas, urban areas, dense urban areas, multifunctional urban areas, in which I investigated. So we have on the one hand Vienna. It's an area close to Prater, like to the big park in Vienna. And on the other hand, it's Shanghai. It's a technology center. And maybe the scale is different. How can I actually say that those two are comparable? And in order to do so, I did not go to measurable architectural qualities. I did not start to measure the plaza and how it's compared to this plaza and the height of the buildings. What I did, I asked people in the area, what is their subjective feeling about this space? Is it open? Is it closed? Is it public or is it more private? Do you feel inspired or discouraged in this area? And by that means, I kind of figured out that these two areas are comparable, but on an emotional level, on a more phenomenological level. So I conducted the survey in these two areas based on, I could say they are comparable, and I get some demographics just for validation reasons. It's not a huge amount of people I investigated. For my thesis, it was about the explorative component. So I had like 30 people in total that are completing the online survey. It was kind of a lot of things to do. And it was almost equally balanced between architects and non-architects, a bit more non-architects which did it. And what the idea was that I'm giving them an image of the area, and I told them, based on your feeling, which part would you consider monumental? And they started to draw on this image. Actually, it's a bitmap in front of the image, and start to draw which do they think is monumental. What is, this was one of the terms. And people started to be kind of creative about all of that, and also kind of the outcome is questionable for some parts. Yet this is something that's not fully developed. How to interpret those different, is that actually intentionally or was it a mistake? This is kind of somebody thought about it because he started to hatch something. So there was the selection that I did pretty preliminary. I took away which I was kind of thinking this was per accident. This is for me not an accident, people really marked something. This is just points that was, questionable. So basically, as an example for the area in Vienna, I took one of the images and overlapped or aggregated all the input of the 30 people I got there. And actually, as you can see, there is kind of something. People actually thought about what they are drawing and where they are drawing, and you can see that they are kind of sure for a certain term where it could be. What I now have to admit is that I didn't tell anybody actually where to draw or what to draw. I just gave them the term and the image and said, do what you think is right. And for architectural purpose, I just blend out everything that's sky or floor. Trees I kept like partially if they're in a building. So I blend out everything that's not architecture related, because for this study it was not about the environment, it was basically about the building. In this particular setup, of course, but I was looking at the buildings. So you have for every image, every series of image, people had to rate on 5 terms, and there were like 40 different varieties, and 80. And basically there you see the overlay, the bitmap, so everything is blended out which is not on the buildings. And basically the analysis, what is kind of how to compare, it was really about where did people mark? This is now a zoom in the bitmap. Where did people mark and how many? Like this slightly darker gray means that more people marked this particular image. And I compared, like I aggregated it, and then I started to compare each term, each quality with each other. So I started to compare, is this more monumental? Is this more structured? Is one of them just structured and not monumental at all? How the terms are linked with each other, and if there is some similarities or some understanding that is pretty close together. What came out was a matrix, actually a half matrix, and where I started to see that for example, the term conservative and the current term structured are pretty much laid over each other. So there's a lot of areas which are conservative, are structured as well, but the density distribution is different. So if they're very structured, they put less conservative, and on the other hand, there is very conservative, but less structured, still linked to each other. And from that, from those, there was an example from Vienna or an example from Shanghai, and from those variety of matrices, I took away, like, I got into the feeling. This is kind of very technical, and it's not very, how to say, it's not good for marketing, just have it lying around like that. So in the discussion, I started to think how to project this, how to bring this for an architect, to visualize it for an architect, at least in a preliminary state. So what I did is I modeled the areas. I remodeled the areas this was in Rhino as a 3D model, and I started to map the outcome images onto the buildings, onto attractor points of the buildings, and got some kind of heat map. It's a pretty preliminary stage. So what I did is, for example, in Vienna, the term progressive pretty much happens in a lot of areas, and the attractor points change the color due to the redder they are. The more red they are, the more the quality appears. So monumental is pretty less in Vienna. It's more progressive, what they thought. Although I have to emphasize again, the term progressive is, I did never tell them what progressive is. It was about their understanding of progressiveness. Or Shanghai, that was the thing, monumental, as you may now remember. Before there was this big stone entrance gate, and that's what they thought, this is monumental. This is something that's very appearing in the area. So basically, come to a pretty simple conclusion, as I don't want to draw any, how to say, I don't want to rate architecture, so I'm not giving a strict conclusion of what happened in the areas. As you have seen now here, this is some glimpse of what happens, but my conclusion, or the conclusion of this thesis and now the paper is that what you can do with that methodology is bridge the gap on an evidence-based method. You can invite people to visualize what their feeling is in terms of quality. And this is something that bugged me for a very long time, that even in architectural competitions, when you participate in that, sometimes your project just, or at university, sometimes your project just gets evaluated by some subjectified meaning of somebody that's apparently sitting as the chair of something or the head of something, but actually only by his understanding of architecture this might be good or bad. And for me this is something very sensitive to touch, of course, but this is somewhere to go to get a more objectified or even this evidence-based method. And it was possible for this area to visualize the qualities. They are verifiable, but as it was just a small amount of people and it was an explorative study, I cannot draw any big conclusions from it. So it was the first step that might bring us somewhere further and opens a discussion in this objectified role of architecture. Thank you for your attention.